The surgeon finds his patient, who was dead for 75 minutes, sitting up on the operating table, awake and talking. Anthony was clinically dead. No pulse, rigor mortis setting in, body temperature dropped. But now he's asking what happened to him. How can someone be alive after I signed their death certificate? I'm Dr. Michael Patterson. For 18 years, I worked as a heart surgeon at Riverside Medical Center in Charleston, West Virginia. But I turned in my resignation last month. During my time there, I did over 3,000 heart surgeries. I saw amazing medical miracles and saved lives that seemed impossible to save. But I'm going to tell you about one case that made me question everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what it means to be human. Riverside Medical Center is a big trauma hospital. It helps people from West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. As the head heart surgeon, I've seen every kind of heart problem you can imagine. Big heart attacks, birth defects, bad injuries, and cases where patients came in almost dead but walked out weeks later completely fine. The case that changed everything started on a cold February night in 2023. I was finishing my work when my pager buzzed at 11:47 at night. The message was from Dr. Sarah Chen in the emergency room. Code blue, heart stopped, patient coming in 12 minutes away. Need you in operating room 3 right now. I hurried to the heart surgery room where my team was getting ready. My surgical helper, James Rivera, had worked with me for over 10 years. My anesthesia doctor, Dr. Patricia Williams, was one of the best in the state. If anyone could handle whatever was coming through those doors, it was this team. The ambulance workers wheeled in Anthony Yale, a 37-year-old construction boss from Bellbrook, Ohio. His wife had found him in their bedroom that morning around 4 in the morning. He was breathing funny and wouldn't wake up. When she couldn't wake him, she called 911. The ambulance workers had found a weak pulse during the ride, but Anthony was in really bad shape. His blood pressure was barely there. His skin looked gray and his heartbeat was all over the place. We started trying to save his life right away. How long was he down? I asked the lead ambulance worker as we moved Anthony to the operating table. His family thinks he was down for at least 20 minutes before they found him. We got his heart beating again after 15 minutes of CPR, but it's been touch and go the whole way here. That wasn't good news. After 20 minutes without blood flow, most patients get permanent brain damage. But I've learned never to give up too early. The human body can surprise you. We worked on Anthony for the next 4 hours. His heart would get steady for a bit, then crash again. We gave him every medicine we had, shocked his heart many times, and even thought about emergency bypass surgery. But each thing we tried only helped for a little while. Dr. Williams watched his vital signs constantly. Michael, his pupils are stuck open wide. No reflexes when I touch his eyes. He's not responding to pain at all. I checked his pulse myself. Nothing. The monitor showed a flat line. His skin was cold and rigor mortis was starting around his jaw. At 4:17 in the morning, after trying everything possible, I made the call that no surgeon wants to make. Time of death, 4:17 a.m. We had followed every rule. Anthony showed no signs of brain activity, heart function, or breathing. His body temperature had dropped to 94 degrees even though we tried to warm him up. By every medical standard, I knew Anthony Yale was dead. I went outside to talk to his family. His wife, Linda, was in the waiting room with their teenage son. This is always the hardest part of my job. I sat down across from them and told them the news that no family should ever have to hear. I'm very sorry, I said gently. We did everything we could, but Anthony didn't make it. His heart stopped, and despite our best efforts, we weren't able to bring him back. Linda collapsed into her son's arms. The sound of her grief filled the waiting room. After giving them some time, I explained that they could see him to say goodbye and that we would need to talk about funeral arrangements. What happened next goes against every principle of medicine I learned in medical school. At about 5:30 in the morning, I was in my office filling out Anthony's death certificate when James burst through the door. His face was white with shock. Dr. Patterson, you need to get to operating room 3 right away. There's something wrong with the monitors. What do you mean wrong? The heart monitor. It's showing a heartbeat, a strong one. I looked at him like he was crazy. James, we disconnected him from the monitors over an hour ago. Did you check the wires, sir? That's the thing. We never disconnected him. We were waiting for the family to come say goodbye, and the monitor just started beeping. I ran to operating room 3. Sure, there had to be a technical problem. What I found there challenged everything I understood about the line between life and death. Anthony Yale was sitting up on the surgical table, fully awake, looking around the room with clear, alert eyes. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was quiet but perfectly clear. "What happened to me?" I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to understand what I was seeing. This was medically impossible. I had personally checked that he was dead 75 minutes earlier. No pulse, no brain activity, body temperature dropping, and early rigor mortis. He had been dead by every medical definition I knew. Dr. Williams, who had also rushed back to the operating room, was checking his vital signs with shaking hands. Blood pressure 110/70, heart rate 78, oxygen levels 98%, temperature 98.6 degrees, all normal. "How long was I out?" Anthony asked. Sitting up more and swinging his legs over the side of the table, I walked toward him slowly, still unable to believe what I was seeing. "Anthony, do you remember what happened to you?" He thought for a moment, his forehead wrinkled in concentration. "I remember feeling really sick yesterday. Really sick. Like I couldn't breathe. Linda called 911 and there were ambulance workers in our bedroom. Then nothing until just now. I did a brain test on him. His reflexes were normal. His memory of what happened before he collapsed was perfect. His speech was clear. His thinking was sound. There was no sign at all that he had been clinically dead for over an hour. Anthony, I need to be completely honest with you. You were declared dead at 4:17 this morning. That was over an hour ago. Your heart had stopped. You had no brain activity, and your body temperature had dropped a lot." He stared at me with those clear blue eyes, thinking about this information with amazing calm. "Dead? Like actually dead? By every medical standard I know, yes, you were dead. But I'm here now," he said simply. "I feel fine. Actually, I feel better than I have in weeks." I couldn't argue with that logic, but I also couldn't explain what had happened. I immediately ordered every test we had. Heart tests, blood work, brain scans, and MRI scans. If Anthony had somehow survived what looked like death, I needed to understand how and why. Dr. Chen arrived within minutes of getting my call. As the emergency room doctor who had first treated Anthony, she needed to see this for herself. "This is impossible," she said, looking at the timeline. "I was here when you called the time of death. I saw the flat line. I saw that there were no vital signs." "I know how it sounds," I replied. "But he's sitting right there talking to us, completely alert." The test results came back normal. Better than normal, actually. Anthony's heart function looked perfect. His brain scan showed no signs of damage from lack of oxygen. His blood work showed perfect organ function. There was no medical explanation for his coming back to life. Word of Anthony's case spread quickly through the hospital. Within hours, doctors from heart medicine, brain medicine, emergency medicine, and hospital management were asking questions. How does someone come back from being clinically dead? What had we missed when we first checked him? Dr. Robert Steinberg, our head brain doctor, examined Anthony carefully. "I've been practicing for 30 years, he told me privately. "I've never seen brain function this good after a long heart stop. There should be big brain problems, memory loss, coordination problems, and thinking issues. He shows none of that." The hospital's ethics committee had an emergency meeting to talk about the case. Medical examiners from the state health department were called. Everyone wanted to understand how we had missed signs of life when we first checked, but I knew we hadn't missed anything. I had checked for a pulse myself many times. I had confirmed he wasn't breathing, had no eye reflexes, and his pupils were stuck open. Anthony Yale had been dead and then he wasn't. As news of Anthony's case began to spread in medical circles, I started getting calls from doctors around the country who had seen similar things happen. Dr. Lisa Martinez from Cedars-Sinai told me about a patient who had been declared dead for 23 minutes before suddenly coming back to life. Dr. James Thompson from Johns Hopkins described a case where a woman had been clinically dead for 3 hours. I began researching what's known in medical books as Lazarus syndrome, or coming back to life after failed CPR. This phenomenon was first written about in medical journals in 1982, but cases are very rare and poorly understood. The most documented case I found was that of Velma Thomas, a 59-year-old woman from West Virginia who had been declared clinically dead for 17 hours. Her family had already started making funeral plans when she suddenly came back to life. Like Anthony, she made a complete recovery with no brain problems. What troubled me most about these cases wasn't just that they were medically impossible, but that patients always recovered completely. These patients didn't come back as vegetables or with big brain damage. They came back fully intact, often saying they felt better than they had before their death. Anthony stayed in the hospital for 3 days so we could watch him. During that time, I spent a lot of time talking with him, trying to understand what he experienced during the time when he was clinically dead. "Do you remember anything from when you were unconscious?" I asked him during one of our conversations. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out of the hospital window. "This is going to sound crazy. At this point, nothing sounds crazy to me. I remember floating above the room. I could see you working on me. I could see Linda crying in the waiting room. I wanted to tell her I was okay, but I couldn't." This was the same as near-death experiences reported by other Lazarus syndrome patients. But what made Anthony's case different was how long it lasted. He had been clinically dead for 75 minutes, much longer than most reported cases. "I saw a bright light," he continued, "and I had a choice. I could go toward it, or I could come back. I thought about Linda and our son, and I chose to come back." "What made you choose that moment to return?" I heard Linda's voice. She was talking to me even though the doctors had told her I was gone. She was telling me about our son's upcoming graduation, about the trip we had planned for our anniversary. She said she wasn't ready to let me go. I checked the timeline. Linda had been in Anthony's room talking to his body at about 5:25 in the morning. The monitors had shown his first heartbeat at 5:32 in the morning. Anthony's recovery was complete and fast. Within 48 hours, all his vital signs were normal. His heart function was better than it had been in years. Brain tests showed no problems at all. It was as if his time of being clinically dead had somehow reset his entire system. "I've never felt this good," he told me before going home. "It's like I got a second chance and my body knows it." This raised disturbing questions about our understanding of death itself. If Anthony could be clinically dead for over an hour and then return with perfect function, what does that say about how we define death? How many people have we declared dead who might have recovered if we had waited longer? The hospital's legal department was worried about being sued. Had we made an error in declaring Anthony dead? Could families of other patients claim we had given up too early? But I knew we had followed proper rules. Anthony had met every clinical sign of death. The fact that he had somehow returned didn't change that. Anthony went home after 3 days in the hospital. I saw him for checkup appointments at 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months after his incident. His recovery stayed complete. His heart function continued to be excellent. He had returned to work and was living a completely normal life, but the case continued to bother me. I found myself second-guessing every death I declared. When a patient flatlined, I waited longer before calling the time of death. I began ordering more tests, looking for any sign of remaining brain activity. My colleagues noticed the change in my behavior. "Mike, you can't save everyone," Dr. Chen told me after I had worked on a heart-stopped patient for 3 hours, way past the point where most doctors would have stopped. "How do I know when to stop?" I asked her. "How How do I know they're really gone? You follow the rules. You use your medical judgment. That's all any of us can do. But Anthony's case had broken my confidence in those rules. If our medical judgment could be so completely wrong once, how could I trust it again? 6 months after Anthony's incident, we had another case that couldn't be explained. Walter Williams, a 78-year-old man from nearby Lexington, was brought in by his hospice nurse after she found him not responding in his home. He had been under hospice care for end-stage kidney disease. When the coroner arrived, he examined Walter and declared him dead at 9 at night. The body was prepared to go to the funeral home. I wasn't directly involved in this case, but I was called when something unprecedented happened. At 11:45 at night, a funeral home worker called the hospital in a panic. Walter Williams had started breathing during the embalming preparation. He was alive, conscious, and asking for water. Walter was rushed back to the hospital where I examined him. Like Anthony, his vital signs were completely normal. His kidney function, which had been failing for months, showed amazing improvement. He was alert, knew where he was, and showed no signs of the confusion often associated with end-stage kidney disease. "How do you feel, Mr. Williams?" I asked during his examination. "Better than I have in years, Doc. Is it true they thought I was dead?" "According to the paperwork, yes. You were declared dead by the coroner at 9 at night." Walter chuckled. "Well, that was too soon." Walter's case convinced me that what we were seeing was more than isolated medical oddities. There was a pattern here, something that challenged our basic understanding of death and recovery. Both Anthony and Walter had made complete recoveries after being declared dead. Both said they felt better than they had in years. Both had experienced what they described as near-death experiences during their times of being clinically dead. I began writing down every detail of these cases, creating a complete database of Lazarus syndrome incidents. What I found was disturbing and fascinating at the same time. The medical literature had references to at least 38 documented cases since 1982. The time of being clinically dead ranged from minutes to hours. In every case where brain testing was done, patients showed no signs of brain damage despite long periods without oxygen. Most troubling of all, this phenomenon seemed to be happening more often. Whether this was because of better documentation, improved CPR techniques, or some other factor, I couldn't figure out. As word of my interest in Lazarus syndrome spread, I began getting calls from families around the country who believed their loved ones had been declared dead too early. Medical colleagues started questioning my judgment and competence. Hospital management expressed concern about my obsession with these rare cases. "Michael, you're one of our best surgeons," Dr. Patricia Harris, the chief of staff, told me during a meeting in her office. "But your behavior lately has been concerning. You're keeping patients on life support long past the point where most doctors would stop care. What if they could recover?" I asked. "What if we're giving up too early? You can't base medical decisions on two unusual cases. You know better than that." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something basic about the nature of death and recovery. How many patients had we lost because we followed standard rules instead of waiting for the impossible? My relationships with colleagues became strained. My surgery schedule was quietly reduced. I found myself isolated in my own department, viewed as the doctor who had become too interested in unexplainable phenomena. The final case that convinced me to leave heart surgery happened 8 months after Walter Williams. Velma Thomas, a 59-year-old woman from Nitro, West Virginia, had a massive heart attack at home. Her son found her unconscious and called 911. By the time ambulance workers arrived, Velma had been in cardiac arrest for an estimated 15 minutes. They managed to get a weak pulse and brought her to our hospital. I wasn't the main surgeon on her case, but I was asked to help when her condition got worse. Despite aggressive treatment, Velma's heart stopped twice more after arriving at the hospital. She was put on life support while we tried to stabilize her condition. Her brain showed no activity on tests. Her body temperature dropped dangerously low despite our efforts to warm her up. After 17 hours of intensive care with no signs of improvement, the family made the difficult decision to stop life support. Velma was declared clinically dead, and arrangements were made for organ donation. I was in surgery when it happened, but Dr. Williams called me immediately. "Michael, you need to get down here. Velma Thomas just woke up." I found Velma sitting up in her ICU bed talking to her son. Her skin, which had been grayish and mottled, was pink and healthy. Her eyes were clear and focused. She was asking for something to eat. "How long was I out?" she asked me when I introduced myself. "Mrs. Thomas, you were clinically dead for 17 hours. We had removed you from life support and were preparing for organ donation." She took in this information with amazing composure. 17 hours? That's a long time to be gone. What do you remember from that time? I remember seeing my late husband. He told me it wasn't my time yet, that I needed to come back to take care of our grandson. The next thing I knew, I was waking up here. Velma's recovery was as complete as Anthony's and Walter's had been. Within 24 hours, all her vital signs were normal. Brain testing showed no problems. Her heart function was better than it had been before her initial attack. But the case was the final straw for me professionally. The hospital administration was concerned about being sued. My colleagues were questioning my competence. Families of other patients were asking why their loved ones hadn't gotten the same miraculous treatment. I realized I could no longer practice heart surgery with confidence. How could I make life and death decisions when I no longer understood where the line between life and death actually lay? I turned in my resignation to Dr. Hendricks on a Tuesday morning in March 2024. "Michael, you don't have to do this," she said. "Take some time off. Maybe see someone to talk through what you've experienced." "Patricia, I've seen 3 people come back from being clinically dead. Not near death, not almost dead, actually dead by every medical standard we have. And they all came back perfectly fine. That's not supposed to be possible. Medical oddities happen, you know that. Not like this. Not with this consistency. There's something we don't understand about death, about consciousness, about what it means to be alive. And I can't keep making decisions based on incomplete knowledge." I left Riverside Medical Center and moved to a small town in rural Montana, where I now work as a family doctor. I treat common sicknesses, manage ongoing conditions, and avoid any cases that involve life and death decisions. But the 3 cases I witnessed continue to haunt me. Anthony Yale, Walter Williams, and Velma Thomas were all declared dead using proper medical rules. They all returned to life after significant periods of being clinically dead. They all made complete recoveries that couldn't be explained medically. What disturbs me most is what this means for all the patients we didn't wait for. How many people have we declared dead who might have returned if we had been more patient? How many families have we told their loved one was gone when they might have been experiencing something we don't yet understand? The medical establishment prefers to classify these cases as oddities, rare events that don't warrant changing established rules. But I can't dismiss what I witnessed. I held Anthony's wrist and felt no pulse. I watched the monitors flatline for 75 minutes. I signed his death certificate and then he came back. Since leaving heart surgery, I've continued to research Lazarus syndrome. The cases are more common than most doctors realize, but they're often dismissed or not reported in medical literature. This phenomenon challenges our most basic assumptions about life, death, and consciousness. Some researchers think the syndrome is caused by a buildup of pressure in the chest during CPR, which is suddenly released when resuscitation efforts stop, allowing blood flow to start again. But this doesn't explain cases like Velma's, where the patient was declared dead 17 hours after CPR had ended. Others suggest that our methods for determining death are inadequate, that we're missing subtle signs of life that continue even when conventional vital signs are absent. But I performed those examinations myself. I know what death looks like, and these patients were dead. The most unsettling possibility is that consciousness and life exist in ways we don't yet understand. If Anthony could observe the room while clinically dead, If Walter could experience awareness during embalming preparation, if Velma could interact with deceased relatives during her 17 hours of death, what does that say about the nature of human consciousness? Anthony Yale returned to his construction job and has had no medical issues since his incident. Walter Williams lived for 3 more healthy years before dying peacefully in his sleep in 2022. Velma Thomas continues to live independently and cares for her grandson just as she was told to do during her near-death experience. All 3 have asked me the same question. Why them? Why were they chosen to return when others aren't? I don't have an answer. What I do know is that witnessing these cases changed my understanding of medicine, of life, and of my own limitations as a doctor. The heart that beat after death will haunt me for the rest of my life. Not because it was scary, but because it showed how little we truly understand about the mystery of human existence. Sometimes late at night, I wonder how many other patients might return if we just waited a little longer. But that's a burden I can no longer carry in an operating room. Some questions are too big for one surgeon to answer, and some mysteries are too deep for current medical science to explain. The dead don't always stay dead.